Notice is hereby given that a meeting of the City Council Committee on Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, will be held on Monday, August 22nd, 2022, at 6:30 p.m. in person at City Council Chambers, 93 Washington Street, second floor, and via remote participation in accordance with Chapter 107 of the Act of 2022 for the purpose of discussing a zoning ordinance amendment relative to home occupations. In-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, and the public may also participate, listen, and/or view this meeting while in progress via the remote participation platform Zoom through any one of the following ways. Click on the webinar link posted in the agenda. It is zoom.us.com. Enter webinar ID 822-7441-7256, passcode 534249, or via telephone 877-853-5257, and enter webinar and password as provided. The subcommittee meetings are held to take action for the purpose of making recommendations to the full council. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so in matters not requiring a public hearing, we will post on the City of Salem's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. On tonight's agenda, we have a zoning ordinance relative to home occupation. In attendance, we have all members of the OLA committee, with Councilor Dominguez joining us remotely. We have a quorum within chambers. We also have in attendance Council President Marcillo, Councilor Hapworth, Councilor Watson-Felt. We also have here with us this evening Amanda Chiancola from the Planning Department. Thank you for joining us. And remotely, we have Beth Renard, the City Solicitor, joining us via Zoom as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining on this summer night. I wanted to bring this item to OLA for discussion. This was originally submitted, a zoning ordinance amendment relative to home occupation, the end of 2021 by outgoing Council President Council Madore. It is in relation or related to how home occupation permits are provided within the city. I wanted to bring it for discussion to get feedback to see what next steps we should take on this, if any. The zoning amendment right now is just an OLA for discussion. So if, as we know, we've had a lot of these in front of us this year, if we do want to move forward with the zoning amendment, it needs to go to a joint public hearing. Once whatever we submit to council is then advertised for a joint public hearing, we are then constrained within those four corners of what were advertised in the joint public hearing and what is discussed in the joint public hearing. So that's why I want to make sure that we have a good, robust conversation of what we do want to present, again, if anything, to the joint public hearing before we get to that step, because, again, lessons learned through this year. So I want to make sure we collect all feedback, all questions that we might have. We haven't had a public conversation on this yet, so we want to make sure that we get comments from the public as well. I think this has kind of not really been a major talking point, so make sure that we can get feedback from everyone that is included in this participation as well as the committee and committee of the whole, because this is co-posted. So this evening, it's a lovely summer August evening. I'm hoping we can kind of keep this conversation close to an hour, maybe a little more. And then we'll look for a motion to adjourn. And of course, we can always recap and meet again and continue this conversation. Because again, this is just the very beginning steps, as it does need to go to a joint public hearing if we decide to recommend any zoning ordinance amendments. Sound good? Okay. Now where to start? I'm not quite sure. Okay. So the original amendment submitted by outgoing Council President Moore. Actually, Beth, would you be able to screen share? If you can't, that's fine. I can pull it up as well. You sent out a document last week that showed the actual edits of what we have currently in our zoning ordinance and what the edit that was submitted would be, because we just kind of have in front of us the table and the edit. But if you can show how it is currently written versus the edit and maybe walk us through that, I think that would be kind of really helpful as a starting point.
Okay, it's on the screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, so the proposed edits would make the home occupation accessory use by right use in the residential zones and B5 and the NRCC. And as far as the text goes, the proposed change would create it by right and take out the special permit requirement. And the final change that was recommended was to just have, it shall be operated only by the resident of the dwelling and not just one additional employee. So those are the proposed changes from Councilwoman Madore.
Did everyone get that, or do we have any questions for Beth? Do you want me to move the little thing? Beth, would you be able to make your screen so it's just one page at a time? The way that Zoom is projecting on the screen right here, we can just see, or you're kind of covering where the edits are. If you could make it bigger, I think down in the lower right-hand corner, down in the bottom. If you increase the size, that might work.
There we go.
There we go, yeah. And then yes, thank you. So there's an edit on the zoning table of adding, yes, by right for home occupation. And then the other edit was further down. Within home occupation are allowed by right as opposed to maybe authorized by special permit. And then what was that third one that you said?
The third one was number 2, striking the words with not more than one regular employee not residing in the dwelling unit, striking that section, that phrase.
Great, thank you. Councilor Presnowski?
Thank you. Beth, could you make it a little bit bigger, and maybe just my old eyes that can't read it, but if it would be just one step bigger, that's fine. Yes, that's good. Thank you.
So again, it's just, I think, helpful for me too, to recap the current process that this is changing is home occupations, and perhaps maybe it might be helpful for us to pull up what the definitions of those are as well. I don't know if we have those defined anywhere else, other than where it says professional offices and other home occupations. Is that the only definition that we have of that? Okay. So right now, the current process is that it's authorized by a special permit, which that special permit is granted by the ZBA, correct? The Zoning Board of Appeals? Any questions or comments from the committee? Councilor Varela?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. First off, I think, what Councilor Madore has submitted in the past is definitely an improvement to what we have currently in our city charter. However, my biggest concern is, as of now, how it's written is that only professional offices, anyone that's not making something commercially created or handled, anything that's made with your hands or tangible is not allowed, still within our new edit to this ordinance. So my concern with that is when you do that, you start to eliminate reasonable uses like artists, sculptors, anyone doing woodworking, anything that might be reasonable and tangible. And my issue with this is a lot of our residents would like the opportunity to have an accessory use for home occupation. However, they're not an attorney, they're not a tax preparer, they actually make something tangible. So that's one concern. And the other concern is with the State Sanitary Code 105 CMR 590, basically what the state has allowed any resident in the Commonwealth to do is to basically put up a residential kitchen space. Within the Department of Public Health, they will issue any resident a permit to do this. However, they're not going to check with the local municipalities or the commissioner as far as that this is allowed. So I really believe there's a discrepancy here concerning that. And also home occupation, when you do residential kitchen, it should be an allowable use. It's something that's reasonable. And furthermore, with our newly adopted urban agricultural ordinance, I believe, will see small accessory businesses of our economically disadvantaged residents trying to get into another kind of business. So with that, there you go.
Thank you. Councilor Cohen?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. I do agree with Councilor Varela in this sense. looking at the way the ordinance is written, there's no, the public doesn't know what's allowable and what isn't. And I think there's a whole list of things, in addition to what Councilor Varela said, someone who makes dresses, someone who, does all sorts of crafts. And would they know that they could actually do something and sell it from their house? Also, I know at least in my ward, really close to my house, there is like a detailing, a person who does detailing who actually won the North Shore Salem News Detailer of the North Shore. And so he's got a pretty big operation behind his house. So what is allowable, what isn't? And the other thing is, if someone gets a permit and they end up being a bad actor, is there any recourse for the city? So those are the concerns I have. I think this could be a little more expansive, and I think there needs to be some kind of definition about what people can do and what they can't.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. I'm just going to ask if Beth can answer that second question, and then I'll go to Councillor Hapworth. Beth, are you able to answer? I know Tom St. Pierre unfortunately is not with us this evening, who would probably be the best one to be able to answer this, but do you know if there's any recourse for someone that, at least with the current process, if a permit is issued, is there any recourse for, quote, bad actors or those that fall outside what is permitted?
So Todd would need to, I guess it would have to be determined what was the bad action, whether it's something that police traffic can deal with, if it's, parking inappropriately, or a noise complaint that can be dealt with by the police or the Board of Health. So I guess it would depend on what the actions were, who could take action.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hapworth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think building off of the previous two comments, just from my understanding, currently an artist working out of their house selling their art online, or somebody making whatever and selling it online, is that currently legal where we're at right now, or would that need to be a home occupation? And that's, I guess I'm wondering, as it stands right now, is that by the book legal or not?
Not.
Okay.
Not legal.
So I think I would also be in favor of digging into that just a little bit more, because I think that would be important to look at. The other question, just for my own understanding, is the 25%. I don't know if you know, Beth, but is there a reason why we stipulate 25% of the gross floor area for I'm just wondering why that's regulated. I understand that's probably what most home offices are. It's probably that or less, but I'm just curious as to why it's regulated that way.
I've actually this week looked at several other communities, and 25% seems to be consistent across the board. It's probably a number that's, a lot of these ordinances are borrowed from other communities, so it might be something that's been sort of passed along, and it's intended to be an accessory use, so it would be a smaller portion than half. So I just imagine it's something that seems reasonable, and being an accessory use, 25% might, seems reasonable to me as an accessory.
Thank you. I guess I'm imagining, again, an artist, if we were to amend that language, an artist living in a smaller home, their space may be well over 25% that they're devoting to doing that. So just something I think we should think about. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge and thank that Amanda from the Planning Department is here this evening. I appreciate it. I know you pulled some information from us. I wanted to ask, I don't know if you have anything to add to this conversation. I think there are a lot of questions around what is home occupation and how is that defined? I mean, I have a lot of the same questions that were just asked this evening, especially around if somebody's running an Etsy store out of their home and making little crocheted hats, are they in violation of this ordinance, or are they in violation of not having a permit within the city for a home occupation? And I'm thinking no employees, they're just doing it on, Etsy line, which we have a lot of those. And it sounds like that is technically in violation, according to the city solicitor, I'm hoping. Yeah. So I'm curious, there must be other cities that have this issue or run into this. I don't know if I know that this is definitely not your specialty, Amanda, but if you have any insight or anything to add, that would be great. Yeah, please.
Hi, thank you. This is Amanda Chincola with the Planning Department. I sent over some literature from the American Planning Association that's in the file about home occupations. So this isn't from other communities in the North Shore, but it's more nationwide definitions of what home occupations are. And American Planning Association defines home occupations to include any professional or personal service, online or in-person retailing, or manufacturing or assembly activities occurring on the same lot as a principal residential structure. So they have a much broader definition, and then you can see, as Beth noted, that this ordinance may have been adopted from another community that sort of narrowed that definition down, but you can broaden it up. The American Planning Association, so that's the APA.
Yep, and I'll note too that the documents that you sent were dropped in the shared OLA folder, so there's a lot of great information. Also, along with that, a list of all the permits that have been issued for the city, which I thank you, Councilor Marcillo, for putting that in an Excel file for us, so we can go through and look at what has been issued in the past. Was it 10 years?
It goes back to the 70s.
Oh,
And those are the permits that we could find. There's probably a lot more than that, or there could be more that were missed that was going through our repository, Laserfiche, and just typing in home occupation and grabbing as many as we could.
Great, well, thank you for doing that. Councilor Watson-Feld?
Thank you. Could you repeat the list one more time? I'm specifically looking for a clarification around what I think you said was in-person retail.
Yeah, let me pull this up again. Home occupations include any professional or personal service, online or in-person retailing, or manufacturing or assembly activities occurring on the same lot as a principal residential structure. Again, a very broad definition, and then communities can narrow that down.
And then one follow-on question, if I may, Chair. Amanda, is there anything in the APA's guidance around the square foot area or the percentage of a dwelling that can be used?
I'll have to read it again. I don't recall seeing that, but it could be in there.
I mean, my guess, just as a comment, editorializing here for a second, is to your point, I think it just keeps it as a subsidiary use, so it cannot be argued as a principal purpose, is a guess.
Councilor Rilla?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. To answer your question, Councilor Watson-Felt, it will always be an accessory use because the main primary use is always going to be the dwelling, so it can never be a primary use because it's in a residential district. So what I wanted to say was, in 1971 and 2022, there's been 23 permits that have been issued by the ZBA for home occupation. We all know that there's more entities in our city that are actually practicing home occupation that have not had a permit. So I really believe that if we have specifics on what the allowable uses are, this might open up the door, not open up the door, but allow people that are already in the act of home occupation to feel a little more comfortable that they can actually come to the city and be like, oh, what I was doing all along is an appropriate use. But what I also wanted to get into was, if we're going to be a little more specific, we also need to talk about prohibited occupations as well. A couple of those being repair and painting of automobiles, trailers, boats, or vehicles, barber shop, a restaurant, a stable or kennel, we already have language for that through Chapter 8 animals, and then letting of rooms and lodging. So I think there should be some specifics on what's prohibited that could be more tailored to Salem. But I see the issue with getting specific with what's allowed and what's not allowed. But I think if we keep it too vague, it's just going to leave too much room for interpretation, and it'll eventually be an issue for the ZBA.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Varela. I wonder, I think we have some scenarios where, because we cannot list everything, especially, like, who knows what the next 10 years are going to bring, but perhaps list what we can, and then other items be granted with special permit, and those do need to go in front of the ZBA. Just a commentary from me. Councilor Poznanski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Has the issue of parking or traffic been addressed as part of this conversation or part of this ordinance? And what I'm saying is, if somebody is in a neighborhood and they open up a home occupation, I think the neighbors want to know how many vehicles are going to be coming and going because of that business. Where are they going to park? Is this in a residential parking zone where maybe residential parking is very, very tight? Do the people who apply for the home occupation permit, are they going to be made to provide 1 or 2 parking spaces for that, or whether it's in their driveway or on their property? I don't see anything about any traffic or parking issues in specific addressed here.
Thank you, Councilor Poznanski. And Beth, I see that there are not any edits in the proposal that's in front of us right now. I think the current process, though, of it going to the ZBA, they have a checklist before they issue the permit of items, and parking is one of those items. Again, if Tom was here, he might be able to speak to those items a little better, but I don't want to put you on the spot. You probably don't have those at your fingertips. I can look them up too, but
I do not have the checklist in front of me, I'm sorry, no.
okay. But yes, that should be part of the conversation. That has not been part of the conversation yet, because there were no, I guess, amendments changed to that piece. See a bunch of hands. Did you know? Councilor Cohen?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. So just because I happen to go to a lot of ZBA meetings, it's a general checklist. It's basically, is it going to improve the neighborhood quality? Is it going to generate positively economically? Is it fit the zoning? A lot of times, they can actually create rules like hours of operation or where people can park on the street. So I think a lot of that is covered in the ZBA decision-making. But we haven't. So I think to Councilor Varela's point, if only 23 have been issued, how many people are doing business in their home, which should be acceptable, because maybe people don't even know they're doing it, or the Etsy example, as you put it, Chair. And this would give some validity, much like the ADU ordinance.
Councilor Varela?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. I really believe a way to figure this out concerning traffic and parking for our residents is writing something that says no home occupation shall generate traffic volumes greater than what would normally be expected in a residential neighborhood. I think that's one way of loosely interpreting what is a normal use in a neighborhood. Some neighborhoods are busier than others. Furthermore, I believe that with home occupation, someone should be allowed at least 1 employee, but if that employee requires parking, I think it might be suitable if that parking spot would be taken care of for the property owner. I think that's where we'd kind of get in a mess with that employee parking. I know. I'm done.
You lost your cover. Councilor Varela, do you mean 1 employee in addition to the resident of the home?
Correct.
Councilor Marcillo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not being a member of the committee, so I guess I'm looking for a way to kind of thread the needle here, to find some sort of a definition where we can have some by right home occupations, like all of the music teachers that are currently giving lessons in Salem in their homes. I did not see any permits for them, for instance. Etsy, people that create things and sell them on Etsy, or do some sort of other internet sales for items where they may have 1 employee, they may not have another employee, but it's mostly shipping products. Also, the home kitchen for bakers that want to sell products from their their kitchen. It seems to me like there's got to be some sort of a way to define this where those can be by right. If you're trying to open up a studio, like I did see in the list of a previous permit many years ago for, I think it was like a craft studio where they would give lessons to kids, not any more than 8 at a time, in their home. So maybe something like that, because it would have some sort of a traffic impact during those times of operation. Maybe that would need ZBA approval to let the neighbors weigh in. So I guess above and beyond the normal use of your home for what you're trying to do. I guess, Beth, that's what I'm looking for, is some sort of a way to specify certain occupations that could happen by right, and then others that may have a larger impact on the community. You know, more than X number of people at the home at a time, maybe, would trigger this, and, yeah.
Thank you. Beth, I don't know if you're able to answer any of that. It seems more of a concept conversation.
Yes, so there are certainly other models that we could look at where some uses are by right, those uses that are maybe a psychologist or a tutor, a music tutor, those would be by right, and others by special permit, and others that are prohibited. I have seen other ordinances that have 3 classifications, and they spell out the types of occupations, whether, you know, barbers are prohibited, for example. You know, home tutoring might be allowed by right, but you know, if you had an employee and maybe you had you know, a cookie business in your kitchen, perhaps because you might be getting deliveries. Perhaps that's by special permit. So I've seen different variations. City of Newton has one similar to that.
Thank you, Councilor Hepler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, not being a member of the committee. I wonder if we could take the APA definition, which captures just about everything. I'm just trying to think of how we would build this out, but if we could create 2 separate categories, home occupation and light home occupation. I think the majority of that we would consider light uses, and that could be by right, and that things that we look in there and we say we want to allow for this, but we don't want this to be by right, that could fall under a different definition. I'm just thinking about how that would be, and the rest of it, that we separate these things into 2 separate categories. We don't try to sort of overcomplicate it.
Perhaps Amanda's department and my department could provide some samples to the council to take a look at.
Thank you, Amanda, you're a volunteer. No, I'm just kidding. So what I'm thinking, like what I'm hearing is almost like we might be able to bucket these types of occupations, so those that have additional employees that are coming in, or those that have retail portion, those that have manufacturing that neighbors might be concerned about. Kind of putting those in buckets in different levels, so some just by right, like, an accountant preparing tax returns and nobody really coming in, maybe dropping off files every once in a while, but that's it, is a different level of impact on the neighborhood than a retail store that has 2 employees coming daily and is manufacturing something made of metal, I don't know. So the different levels of some sort, and what did we just do recently where, there was, I think it was Bridge Street, where there was like, the first is just kind of basic, the second goes to an application of some sort that has a matrix that's followed, and then, at the most extreme would then go to ZBA if needed, but we'd have to figure out how to bucket all of those. Is that kind of, I'm seeing nods, so, okay. Just making sure I understand where the conversation's going, so it seems like that might be a good solution here. So stemming off from what was originally submitted to us, but breaking it down further, so it's not just a blanket by right, and it is inclusive of all possibilities for home occupation. Okay. A lot of work ahead of us. Anyone else? Councilor Varela?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. So my issue with some of the provisions concerning the amount of traffic and people coming in and out is you really can't delineate how many, I guess, someone is bringing in and out of their home at one time. As a city, we don't put a restriction on how many people you can come in and out of your home, whether they be friends or family. So when we're talking about home occupation, most of the allowable uses are not industrial uses. They are very much so an accessory use. And, you know, that's where I believe that a lot of these, if we get specific with what is allowed, a lot of the uses aren't going to generate a crazy amount of traffic. Furthermore, when it comes to deliveries for, let's say, food coming from a distributor, you know, we have Amazon Fresh now, we have Peapod from Stop and Shop. We have a lot of different entities already delivering to our homes. I think it's going to be really hard to establish whether it be for a home use or an accessory home occupation use. Thank you.
Councilor Watson-Feld?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi, not being a member of the committee. The only thing I would add to what, or I guess counter to what Councilor Varela said is just, I think the primary concern about numbers coming into neighborhoods really boils down to, you know, everyone expects that around a single event, a party, the holidays, right? But no one expects a dozen cars 3 times a day, every day. And so it's that cumulative effect on a neighborhood that does potentially, especially in Ward 2, affect the quality of life for access to one's home in their own neighborhood. So if you consider, like, for example, Lynn and Federal, that area, right, highly populated, really dense, lots of cars. If you were to add a sewing class, right, of 8 additional cars twice a day, every day of the week, that's 16 additional cars in a relatively tight area already. And I could see that, and not that I disagree with the use. I'm actually, not that I'm a member of the committee, very supportive of this. But I do think that when we talk about what folks are concerned about, like, that's what it comes down to. And so I think when this concept of bucketing the kind of occupation it might be, probably we'll find ends up boiling down to the numbers of people who need to access a home on a daily basis. So it may be that if you're going to run classes or whatever the case with more than one student or 2 visitors or whatever we decide, right, that's probably what is going to be, people are going to want to dig into. I just ask that you keep in mind the cumulative effect of additional density in the neighborhoods on a daily basis. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's going to be helpful perhaps when we have a initial list of what occupations might fall where, we would get our brain going of issues, because honestly, traffic and parking is not at the top of my mind. What's at the top of my mind are sounds, noises, and smells. Which that could be kind of the hardest to regulate and control. So seeing that list in front of us, I think, might be something that's helpful. I know that there were a few examples provided from Amanda that we can dig into as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be a fine line or a balance that we'll have to hit, which is why we're having the discussion to see what we need to strike up and do. So, Beth, I know that Tom St. Pierre was unable to attend this evening, but did he relay any thoughts to you on this?
So his concerns are based on enforcement and complaints that his office might get regarding noise or traffic. So he's just concerned that we may be opening the door for his office to get more enforcement type complaints. And he's concerned about the neighborhoods and protecting the neighborhoods from any nuisances or compatibility type issues. Those are his concerns.
That's a good point, and to also, I guess, call out that the current enforcement of it lies solely on him, which that would probably be another amendment that we would present to add additional levels of enforcement, so it's not just a one-man show. Councillor Watson-Felt?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. Could someone repeat for me what the last thing that the city solicitor said at the very end? I didn't understand her words. I couldn't hear her. Sorry, Beth.
His concern is with compatibility with the neighborhoods.
Compatibility with neighborhoods.
Compatibility.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Councillor Varela?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi. So concerning hours of operation for home occupation, I think what makes it really a lot of control on this is an accessory use to the residential districts. So what still applies are noise ordinances and anything that would be deemed unreasonable in a residential neighborhood. So again, this is an accessory use. So all home occupations have to keep in regard the viability of the neighborhood. So I think that's really clear as an accessory use where our zoning enforcement officer would have some authority to shut it down if it becomes unreasonable.
Thank you, Councilor Varela. I'd be interested to, perhaps we need to take that as part of this exercise too, because I'm not sure about smells, if those are noted in our current, to be perfectly honest, I've had a few complaints of those, so I don't think there's any regulation there. So it'll be a good exercise to comb and see what we do have, and also just education to the public of what those current rules are. Councilor Varela?
Thank you, Chair Riccardi, if I may. When it comes to smells, when you have organics, that's not an issue because it's not going to hurt anyone. But when a company is actually using caustic chemicals, more than likely they are subject to regulating authority concerning how to exhaust fumes and anything regarded to what would be maybe an issue for public health and safety. So within our city charter as an industrial use, that should be taken care of. Again, it's an accessory use. You cannot have an industrial business in your backyard. So
I think we have some homework ahead of us. We'll take a first stab of listing out possible occupations, I'm guessing, and then perhaps what those buckets might be. I know a lot of people have some thoughts and ideas onto that, so we'll do that. Actually, I do see there's one member of the public that joined us. If anybody from the public has any comments that they'd like to add, just raise your hand on the Zoom function. We'll take public comments. If not, okay. If not, I'll just recap that we will probably meet again in a month to go over this. We'll just keep this as a continuing conversation. Again, zoning. We don't want to be stuck in those four corners. We want to make sure that we have a draft that we are all comfortable with, but we'll keep moving it forward. Any other comments or questions? Councilor Varela?
concerning the actual specific uses, is that something we're going to discuss next meeting, or is it something we can discuss now and have everyone look deeper inside of it and see what's going on?
Sure. Well, so I would say for the next meeting, we will have a list to review of actual uses. So if anybody wants to send a list directly to me, I'm going to definitely ask for assistance from the planning department to add in the APA, I'm saying that acronym wrong, information as well. So we'll get a document in the shared drive to put out. But if you want to have any, I mean, we still definitely have time, but if you want to add your commentary or points about those uses, it might be more helpful with us to have some time to kind of digest. I don't know. I mean, we got time. What does the committee feel? We can definitely continue the conversation. I'm not.
So we don't need to continue the conversation now, but just so everyone knows, in the shared drive under planning, there is a proposed list of uses, prohibited and allowable. that I did submit to Ms. Giancola. So if anyone wants to take a look at those were taken from the city of Revere and Newton. So I believe they are somewhat, comparable to the uses here in our region here. So, yeah.
Cool. Anything else? Counselor Cohen?
I move that we keep this in committee.
Thank you. I'll write that down. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Counselor Presniewski. Since we have a remote attendee, I will do roll call vote. Counselor Cohen?
Yes.
Counselor Presniewski?
Yes.
Counselor Varela?
Yes.
Counselor Dominguez?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, so 5-0, that will stay in committee. And I will you'll all see the next agenda. I will try to give you as much of a heads up. I will make sure that you all have a link to that shared drive, which does have a lot of this information in there. And I'll also reach out to Beth to see if there's any kind of framework that we can start to use for bucketing out those items and if we wanted to go down that route as well, so we can have something to review in front of us. And where those pieces would need to be reviewed, I also think it will be helpful to see in front of us those other items that we currently do have in place around noise, sound, which is the same thing as noise, smell in residential areas. That would be helpful to have an additional review, and any parking items. Yeah, parking and traffic. Cool. Am I missing anything? Councilor Varela?
Motion to adjourn?
Councilor Varela moves to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Presniewski. Do a hand call vote on that. All those in favor? Awesome. Okay, thank you very much. We are adjourned. I appreciate everyone coming out for this discussion tonight.